What advice would you give to like young musicians who want to like get where you guys are?
What's the expression to let the dream die?
Work hard. Work as hard as you can. Follow your dream.
Let the dream die.
Let the dream die.
Go to college. Your band sucks. Your demo sucks. Everybody knows it but you and your friends. And they won't tell you.
After being dropped by major label Elektra Records following the release of White Pepper, from an outside perspective, Ween's future seemed to be in jeopardy. But the band weren't concerned. They had begun talks with indie label Sanctuary and had a new crop of songs that they felt were as strong as those on the Mollusk. They also had a smoking gun. Andrew Weiss, former longtime producer and mentor of the band, had agreed to come back on board to produce their next album. The future was looking bright. But then, as it so often does, tragedy struck.
Oh, we're Ween.
What's a Ween?
We're a band, you know.
Out of nowhere, out of the total musical vacuum, out of total darkness, comes one ray of light. And it's fucking Ween.
On August 7th, 2002, the band received a call. Claude was in critical condition after a horrifying car crash on Route 78 in New Jersey. 3 years later, Claude would write a piece describing the event for the Denver Post. I'll let him explain. My last conscious memory before my life and body were altered forever was eating a slice of pizza in Hoboken, New Jersey. As I ate, I kept a watchful eye on my car, which was parked at an expired meter and vulnerable to another parking ticket I didn't need. I awoke several days later with family and friends surrounding me and in intensive care at a hospital in Newark. My body shattered, my mind in a state of severe trauma and disorientation. The left side of my body screamed with searing hot and immobilizing pain. The left side of my face drooped. My speech was slurred, my jaw rigid. The room spun endlessly. The vertigo and dizziness wouldn't stop. By accounts given to police, I was traveling westward toward my rural home when traffic stopped suddenly. I pulled to the left, and an 18-wheeler that was riding my tail at unstoppable speed did the same and rear-ended my car, shooting me across the grass median and into opposing lanes. My car was hit head-on at full speed. My car was a mangled pile of steel. The top of it had to be cut off to get me out. Intravenous drugs were administered to me as the car was cut open. I suffered multiple fractures of the pelvis, severe brain trauma, and injuries with blood clotting in the brain, resulting in paralysis on the left side, a fractured jaw, damage to my vision resulting in the constant vertigo and dizziness, and substantial muscle damage to my leg and back. The outpouring of support from fans and friends was overwhelming. My room was covered to the ceiling with cards, flowers, and balloons. I tried my best, under a cocktail of painkillers and a haze of trauma, to convince my nurses I was Jay-Z. They didn't buy it. When I got out, I had to relearn speech, memory skills, and other aspects of communication. After not walking for more than 2 months, I worked my dough legs well enough to get back on stage and perform with my bandmates for an unannounced acoustic show in New York, only 3.5 months after the accident, to the ravenous and shocked appreciation of several hundred people. On a bad day, the combinations of what I live with are nothing short of resolute, hopeless agony that is imprisoning and at times a suppressant of any true happiness. On an average day, however, I'm gracious and blessed to be above the ground, breathing in the gloriousness of life, and making art that stirs my heart, and others' hearts, something I never took for granted before, but that perhaps now has become that much more of a requisite to sustain me, like food and water.
3, 4.
To combat his crippling medical bills, Ween organized 2 concerts on October 7th and 8th at the Bowery Ballroom in New York, the proceeds of which would go to Claude. Claude Aid, as it was dubbed, would see Josh Freese fill in on drums. Freese is a prolific musician with a laundry list of credits, having been a member of bands like Devo, Guns N' Roses, The Vandals, A Perfect Circle, 9 Inch Nails, Sublime with Rome, and, most recently, Foo Fighters, before being dropped unceremoniously. Josh fit right in with Ween and picked up dozens of songs from the band's storied history with ease. It seemed only natural then that Freese would fill in for Claude during his long recovery, even during the recording sessions for the new album. With Claude's blessing, Freese officially became a temporary recording member of Ween. Recording sessions for the new album were slow and meticulous, as Ween and Weiss sought to bring the best versions of each song to the project. The band once again recorded the album in several different locations, including the previously flooded beach house from the mollusk, which had seemingly become a lucky charm for the band. On August 5th of 2003, Ween released their 8th studio album, Quebec, on indie label Sanctuary Records. The cover for the album was adapted from the box art of a board game, Thorns, released by 3M in 1974. Dean had come across the game at a flea market before tasking SME design artist Phil Yarnell with adding the Ween brothers to the cover, replacing the original couple. During the era when the album was written, Gene was dealing with the emotional fallout of the divorce with his first wife. As such, many songs on Quebec are not only earnest and candid, as tracks like She's Your Baby and Falling Out were on White Pepper, but also dark, much darker than anything they had produced prior. So while Quebec is still one of their less brown records in comparison to something like The Pod, it's far from fluff and can often venture into uncomfortable displays of emotional sincerity. But you wouldn't know that from the first track. The album begins with It's Gonna Be a Long Night, a red-hot thrash track. Long Night serves as a sequel of sorts to Stroker Ace from White Pepper, and sees Dean channeling his best Lemmy impression to deliver some of the band's fiercest vocals to date. While some see It's Gonna Be a Long Night as an outlier in the track list, I think it serves to herald the epic quality of the album you're about to experience. As a fun fact, Dave actually frequently sings a song live to allow Dean to focus on guitar, and in my opinion, he does a great job. Next is Zoloft, a piece of introspective psych pop about the pros and cons of being medicated. Zoloft was actually the song that convinced the band to bring Andrew Weiss on as producer, according to Gene in his interview with Matt Gonzalez from Pop Matters. When I was writing Zoloft, there's this little taster, a backwards cymbal sound in there, and that keyed Andrew Weiss, because it's such an Andrew thing to do. Then I realized that he should probably just work on all the songs, so we got him back. After the blistering garage rock of the opener, Zoloft serves as a slight come down, and an omen of things to come. But it's not all doom and gloom just yet. First, there's Transdermal Celebration is an anthemic arena rock track that rivals even Buckingham Green and Spinal Meningitis in scale. Starting off strong with one of the band's greatest guitar licks, the song transitions into a recounting of the euphoria of a drug trip, followed by the bittersweet calm that comes after. The track also contains one of Diener's greatest solos of all time, which is equal parts soaring, iconic, and melodic, but also contains a hint of dissonance. The solo in question also happened to be played on a guitar belonging to none other than Carlos Santana. I'll let Dean explain in his interview with Scott Bernstein for Jam Bass. So we're in the middle of the session, and I get a phone call from my roadie, Nameless, who also worked for a backline company, Nameless, that supplied amps, drums, lights, etc. to bands touring in the Northeast. My roadie told me that Carlos Santana's equipment, including his guitars, had arrived via a trucking company that night at their depot. Carlos was recording an appearance on Good Morning America the next morning, and his equipment was to be delivered to the set in NYC in a few hours. What needed to be done was immediately clear to me. I had an opportunity to play the solo on Transdermal Celebration through Carlos Santana's amplifier and guitar. I had one shot at it. It meant taking a hard disk recorder to a storage space where all of Carlos' stuff was sitting in transit. I arrived at 2 a.m. We very carefully unpacked his equipment and set up his stage gear, and in one take, I recorded the guitar solo for Transdermal Celebration, the one that appears on the album, playing through Carlos Santana's guitar, pedal board, and amplifier. The whole thing took 10 minutes, and we were terrified we were going to get caught. A lot of people would have lost their jobs. We got the f*** out of there really fast after that. So the solo on Transdermal Celebration was played through all of Santana's shit and what resembled an early morning bank heist or something. And if you didn't love this album already, they've definitely got you now. Among His Tribe is an intimate folk number about family and tradition through the ages. The production brings to mind images of the desert, and the whole track is a masterclass in immersive songwriting, as you sink into the mindset of your distant ancestors. Then there's So Many People in the Neighborhood, which feels more like what you would expect to hear from a Ween track. Calling to mind previous tracks like Candy or even Blackjack from God Ween Satan, Neighborhood still manages to bring a newfound maturity to the noise pop form factor, with the song spiraling into chaos before spacing out in a psychedelic bridge. The lyrics perfectly depict the mundane paranoia of living in the suburbs, and while it's the least anthemic or accessible track so far, it still manages to feel right at home. Speaking of anthemic and accessible, next is Tried and True. Ween's second most popular song, behind Ocean Man, of course, is, surprise surprise, really good. Featuring a gorgeous acoustic arrangement, some of Jenner's best and most expansive vocals yet, and even a sitar solo. Tried and True is 4 minutes of pure bliss. Strangely enough, the song was featured in an episode of the CW show, Superman and Lois, which was titled, you guessed it, Tried and True. A real chicken and the egg scenario there. Happy Colored Marbles is a creepy psych number, prominently featuring the marimba, of all things. The track feels like it's teetering on the edge of chaos, before it finally implodes in the bridge with a barrage of manic distortion. Both thematically and sonically, this section in particular might be the heaviest Ween ever gets, and Happy Colored Marbles earns a spot among my favorite tracks on this album for that reason alone. Then there's Hey There Fancy Pants, which feels like sonic whiplash after the last track. Fancy Pants initially seems like a classic Ween comedy jaunt, but the goofy performances belie a darkness underneath that's merely hinted at with lines like, drinking down your dinner, all alone. When looked at through the macro lens, the song indicates a growing dissatisfaction with the obligation Ween felt to be a funny or edgy band. Fancy Pants and Quebec in general forecast in no uncertain terms the new sincerity Gene was aiming for in his songwriting. Captain is a spacey piece of near slowcore. The track calls to mind songs like Planet Caravan by Black Sabbath or Echoes by Pink Floyd and its ambience. It almost acts as a checkpoint of sorts in the album, a spot where you can catch your breath. Chocolate Town is a sweet country-esque ballad, seemingly about going through withdrawal and emerging victorious on the other side. Some claim it to be written by Mean Ween, detailing his time in jail after being busted for possession. The title is likely a reference to Hershey, PA, the home of Hershey's chocolate, thus, Chocolate Town. It's a sweet song about finding a new lease on life, which always elicits a big response from the crowd by the time Gene sings the Greyhound Bus to Chocolate Town line. Next is I Don't Want It, a heartbreaking look at the inevitability of heartbreak. In many ways, it's a callback to the pop ballads of White Pepper, like She's Your Baby, but with the added bonus of an earth-shattering solo at the end from Gene. I Don't Want It is equal parts beautiful and brutally depressing, and it's not even the saddest song on the record. More to come. Then there's the F***ed Jam, a 3-minute instrumental loop that stops and starts again ad nauseum. Under the liner notes for the track, it just says, nope. Pure genius. Enough said. Alcan Road is another spacey post-rock track, in the vein of Captain, but a little less abstract this time. It's one of the few Ween studio tracks that's never been played live, which is a shame because it's a great song. One that draws to mind visions of fantasy realms and sci-fi adventures, and it leads perfectly into The Argus, one of Ween's greatest forays into prog of all time. A beautiful track based loosely on the all-seeing Argus from Greek legend. However, the original inspiration was a building in Claude's neighborhood, according to Dean on Facebook. Up the street from Claude's house on Route 31 in Hopewell, New Jersey, was this big rundown factory with this crazy, almost satanic symbol on the face of the building, and the name of the place was Argus International. That's what started it all. Finally, there's If You Could Save Yourself, You'd Save Us All, the heart-wrenching explosion of all the pent-up emotions Gene had been feeling in this era. Ending in his most desperate and emotional vocal performance, If You Could Save Yourself sees Ween temporarily dip its toes into Freeman territory, but man does it feel cathartic. This is Ween at their most sincere, while simultaneously feeling like an epic, satisfying conclusion to the greater narrative of the album. There was another song on the album that got cut at a very late stage, that being Ooh Va La, It was cut so late, in fact, that it shipped on the Japanese version of the album as track 3. As you can imagine, these versions of the album are in high demand by collectors. Andrew Weiss felt that Quebec saw the band get lost in the sauce on tracks like Captain and Alcan Road, and Hank Steamer's 33 1/3 on Chocolate and Cheese. Andrew was quoted as saying, "There's a lot to be said for 4 tracks. When you do something on 4 tracks, everything's gotta count. There's no room for fluff. And on some later stuff, we were maybe guilty of that. Quebec was definitely guilty of that. There was a lot of fluff there. By that point, Pro Tools had gotten really user-friendly, and you could just record like a million vocal tracks, and all that stuff. But that's exactly what makes Quebec so great. It's indulgent, it's melodramatic, and yes, at times, meandering. And I wouldn't have it any other way." Ween once again hit the road to promote Quebec in 2003 and 4, though in truth, they had never really left the stage. Quebec received a much warmer reception across the board than White Pepper, but less fanfare overall due to its independent release. At this point, Ween had seemingly settled into a niche. The people that liked Ween were going to listen to the new Ween album. An album promo would come from a slow word-of-mouth fan campaign. In December, Claude would rejoin the band's live performances, having made a miraculous recovery, and things were seemingly back to normal. But after releasing 15 of their best songs ever, it felt like it would be a while until Ween could write another album's worth of new songs at a similar level of quality. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to revisit some of those hundreds of songs they had left on the cutting room floor.
We're holding out on the box set until somebody offers us like $5,000, in which case we'll bust back into these tapes, which are probably all demagnetized and deteriorated. Yeah. Then we'll pick all the wrong songs and put it out. Tons of stuff. Sell it for $16.99 when we're old and poor.
His little thing here, there he is. That's Ben Franklin. He's going to invent a move called the Franklin.
I'll invent a move called the Franklin.
See?